Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Alan. My name is Generation Tech. Now, the New Republic officially won the Galactic Civil War in 5 ABY with the signing of the Galactic Concordance Treaty. Under the terms of the Instruments of Surrender, the Empire was ordered to cease fighting and stop the recruitment and mobilization of stormtroopers, and whatever Imperial Navy forces that were left were confined to predetermined boundaries within the core and inner rim where the local populace were still pretty pro-Imperial. But by 9 ABY, when The Mandalorian is taking place, there obviously are rogue factions of Imperial remnant forces roaming around the galaxy. Moff Gideon clearly has not ceased fighting, he has not stopped using stormtroopers, and he's most definitely in the Outer Rim and not confined in Imperial space. Having broken the conditions of the Galactic Concordance Treaty, he is now officially a war criminal. So why has the New Republic not gone after him and stopped him? Well, the simple answer could just be that the New Republic is incompetent and inefficient. But a more nuanced approach shows us the truth. A mix of political interest, public interest, and general shenanigans by power brokers in the galaxy has converged together to make the New Republic a huge mess. Because sometimes the most difficult part of a war is trying to rebuild after the war is finished. I mean, look at America today compared to what America was like around 2001 when the Twin Towers came down in New York City. Liberals, conservatives, city or countryside, it didn't matter who you were, most Americans wanted blood. And we wanted boots on the ground, and we wanted to send our enemies screaming to their gods. What resulted were two costly wars that might have cost America everything, from our credibility as a country to our economic superiority over other supergiants like China. We lost tons of brave men and women in combat, and even more soldiers returned home broken and ultimately forgotten by our government and the people of this country. More than a decade later, when ISIS established their caliphate in Iraq and Syria, we were presented with an undeniable evil that needed to be stopped with decisive action. But our country at this point had neither the political will or public support to engage in another costly ground war, even though it might have been a good idea. Who knows? And so in 2014, the United States led an international coalition against ISIS. Our contribution was mainly in the form of airstrikes and combat advisors for allied troops on the ground. The point is, after a long period of war, the public generally loses their appetite for war, and then an anti-war sentiment grows, especially in a democracy where people are allowed to express their beliefs and opinions. In Star Wars, after the Clone Wars ends, just a decade and a half later, the Galactic Civil War starts brewing up and then turns into a full-on galactic war. By the time the Empire finally collapses, most people in the galaxy are sick of the fighting. They want peace, they want economic stability, and just an opportunity to rebuild what they have. One good example of the galaxy's war fatigue is a character, Cara Cynthia Dune. Here's this old Iranian who lost everything and joined the Rebel Alliance infantry as a shock trooper and served with distinction. She should have been seen as a huge success story. Here's this hero and veteran and war hero, but instead she's now living on the edges of the galaxy, fighting people in bars and looking for work as a mercenary. By the looks of it, people are terrified of her and what she represents. So it's hard for her to find work, because people don't want to be reminded of the war. This avoid war at all cost mentality is pretty pervasive within the New Republic Senate. In the post-Imperial time, the New Republic no longer needed individuals like Cara Dune, and in the Republic's defense, I'm sure the rebel shock troopers committed their fair share of war crimes and atrocities. I imagine Cara Dune has crushed many stormtrooper skulls with those muscular thighs of hers. And so it makes sense for the New Republic to sort of distance themselves away from potential war crimes and thigh-related atrocities. And that's the whole reason why after the Battle of Endor, the rebellion renamed themselves as the New Republic. It was to establish the legitimacy of this new government. Now, to be fair, Cara Dune ultimately chooses to leave the New Republic on her own terms. She had apparently been assigned to peacekeeping and civilian suppression missions, which just aren't her MO. Also, she reportedly was really upset that the New Republic was forcing her to wear masks because of that new Rhodian virus. She posted all about it on the HoloNet. But the New Republic's anti-war policy wasn't just, dictated by the elected members of this new Senate. It was actually an inherited ideology from the core members of the rebellion. Starting all the way back to its original founders, Bail Organa and Mon Mothma. These two individuals had been major players in the Galactic Republic Senate and continued to resist Palpatine as he began the transition to the Empire. Bail Organa, of course, would die in a tragic mining accident, and Mon Mothma would assume sole leadership of the rebellion. Although Luke and Leia and Han Solo are much more visible as, like, the face of the rebellion, it was really Mon Mothma who held this organization together behind the scenes. Especially in those early days when it was just made up of a dozen or so small local resistance cells who were only united in their hatred of the Empire. It was during these early days, before even the Battle of Scarif, that Mon Mothma would try to root out ideologically opposed factions like Saw Gerrera's partisans. Which was a pretty big deal because at the time the rebellion was in danger of just being wiped off the face of the galaxy, and they really needed all the help they could get, even from individuals like Saw Gerrera. The problem Mon Mothma had with Saw Gerrera was his more military-focused agenda. The partisans were essentially a terrorist organization, and their main goal was to create destruction and kill Imperials. Mon Mothma understood that conventional victories would not defeat the Empire. The rebellion was just way too small. They had to play a long game, which meant that they had to play the hearts and mind game. She believed that the rebellion had to be held to a higher standard in order to attract more individuals to their cause. For the most part, she was spot on with her assessment. The partisans were self-destructive, and no matter how much damage they could create, it was never enough to destroy the Empire, and in many cases, their actions hurt innocent people, which just strengthened the Empire's position and labeling of the Rebel Alliance as a terrorist organization. Now, sometime after the Battle of Endor, when it became possible that the rebellion might defeat the Empire, Mon Mothma actually started discussing the idea of decreasing the size of the New Republic military. She had grown wary of the size of this New Republic military and wanted to make sure that one dictatorship wasn't just replaced by another one. Mon Mothma believed in a weaker federal government and stronger local defense forces, which is why she would help propose the Military Disarmament Act at the same time the Galactic Concordance Treaty was being signed. The Military Disarmament Act was a relatively strange thing for victors of a war to pass. It essentially made plans to reduce the size and scope of the New Republic federal military to about 1/10 of its size at the peak of the war. It would then also redirect all of those funds from the federal military to local defense forces. So now we know the mentality of the New Republic leadership. It wanted to end the war at all costs. Of course, individuals like Princess Leia and Mon Mothma understood the dangers of a re-emerging empire, but these individuals would have been swamped with a million other issues regarding stabilizing the galaxy. Moff Gideon, as important as he might seem to us, still is at the head of a relatively small operation. From what we can tell, he only has an Arcaden-class light cruiser for a command ship and a company of stormtroopers. I mean, sure, he might have like a base somewhere hidden with some Imperial Star Destroyers, but for now, it doesn't seem like a big threat. So it makes sense the only people who are really paying attention to him are, the occasional New Republic soldier who happens to be patrolling that area. Individuals like Carson Teva, this old Galactic Civil War veteran, senses that something is off in the Outer Rim. Now, Carson Teva is more rebel than New Republic soldier, so he's willing to bend the rules and look the other way for the greater good. This actually makes him a terrific Outer Rim lawman. Generally very rigid, rule-oriented individuals do not survive long in the Outer Rim. You kind of have to be a little more creative in this region of space. Carson Teva senses that the New Republic will need as much help as it can get out here and finds allies in Din Djarin, and later even convinces Cara Dune to become a local marshal. Now, Carson Teva is obviously a little desperate here. He's willing to, make a positive relationship with wanted individuals and potential war criminals because he understands that people in the core region of the galaxy don't really understand what's going on at all in the Outer Rim. Carson Teva realized the threat was much greater than anything two X-Wings could deal with, and so most likely he's attempting to build a sort of makeshift early warning network of some kind. Now, this wasn't just a problem during the Mandalorian period. After Mon Mothma steps down, the New Republic Senate actually breaks into two factions. We have the centrists and the populists. The centrists were for a more powerful executive branch and military. Centrists were really law and order oriented, and some of them might even have some sympathies for the Empire, especially after, a few decades had passed and people forgot just how bad Emperor Palpatine was. And then you had the populists, who were more about planetary rights and small central government. Princess Leia and a lot of the original rebels were in this faction. I wonder if Mon Mothma, like George Washington, warned the New Republic about the dangers of political parties and factionalism. Now, when the First Order threats started appearing, a lot of people in both parties favored ignorance and cover-ups instead of confronting this new threat. Senator Leia Organa is one of these leading voices warning about the First Order's increase in size and strength. There are even members of the centrists who were secretly First Order sympathizers, so they would try to label Leia and her party as warmongers, and they even revealed some pretty damaging information that Leia and Luke's father was Darth Vader, who was essentially a war criminal from the previous war. No one actually knew about that other than Luke and Leia and a few other trusted individuals. Not even Leia's son, Ben, knew about this. So winning a war is relatively difficult, but rebuilding, especially after a civil war, is even more difficult. Had Abraham Lincoln not been assassinated, he still would have had to dealt with all the vampires that truly ran the South and the slave trade there. Now, Mon Mothma clearly wants to be a more conciliatory kind of leader. She doesn't want to drive the Imperial remnants to more extremism so that there's another war, but by being almost too peaceful and destroying the New Republic's own military capabilities, she opens the door for the First Order and individuals like Moff Gideon to basically operate in the Outer Rim completely unharassed. Well guys, let me know in the comment section below what you think about our video. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.